An elderly billionaire returns to the house he abandoned years ago. But the moment he opens the door, he is frozen. Instead of an empty house, he finds a young black woman living there with two small childs. Anger surges through him. He nearly calls the police. But after learning the heartbreaking reason she broke into his home, the billionaire makes a choice that will change all of their lives forever. Before we continue, tell us the time and where you're watching from. Subscribe and hype, because tomorrow's story is something special. Andrew Wellington's silver Mercedes pulled onto the gravel driveway just as the autumn sun began its descent behind the Tennessee hills. He killed the engine and sat motionless, staring at the house he hadn't seen in 6 years. The house that represented everything he'd tried to forget. At 67 years old, Andrew Wellington was worth $3.8 billion. He owned commercial properties in 42 states, had built an empire from nothing, and commanded respect in every boardroom he entered. But sitting in front of this modest 3-bedroom house with peeling paint and overgrown landscaping, he felt like a failure. This house was supposed to be his retirement dream. The place where he and Margaret would grow old together, plant gardens, watch grandchildren play in the yard. Instead, Margaret had left him 20 years ago, tired of being married to a man who loved buildings more than people. There had been no grandchildren because there had been no children. Margaret had wanted them desperately. Andrew had always said next year when things settled down. Things never settled down. Now at 67, after a massive heart attack 2 months ago had nearly killed him on his office floor, his cardiologist had given him an ultimatum. Complete rest for 12 weeks or prepare for the next heart attack to be fatal. So here he was, back at the house he'd bought but never lived in, the symbol of everything he'd sacrificed for his empire. Andrew stepped out of the car slowly, one hand instinctively moving to his chest. The pain was gone, but the fear remained. Every twinge, every irregular heartbeat sent a spike of terror through him. His doctor, Gerald Patterson, had been blunt. Your body is telling you to stop. If you don't listen, you'll die. It's that simple. The front garden looked different. Where Andrew remembered only weeds and neglect, now there were rows of autumn flowers, chrysanthemums and asters in deep purples and golds. The walkway had been swept clean. The windows sparkled in the fading light. Someone had been here. Recently. Andrew's pulse quickened, and he forced himself to breathe slowly, counting to 5 like Gerald had taught him. He couldn't afford stress. His heart was still healing, still fragile. He climbed the porch steps carefully, noting that the loose board he'd always meant to fix was now secure. Fresh paint gleamed on the railings. Through the window he could see warm light and movement inside. Then he heard it. Children's laughter. Andrew pushed open the front door, which he distinctly remembered locking 6 years ago when he'd left for what he thought would be a brief business trip that had somehow stretched into permanent abandonment. The scene before him seemed impossible. A small boy, maybe 5 or 6, was building an elaborate tower with wooden blocks in the middle of what used to be his bare living room. A toddler girl, perhaps 2 years old, with her hair in 2 small puffs, crawled across a colorful braided rug Andrew had never seen, babbling happily to a stuffed bear. And sitting on the leather couch, the one piece of furniture Andrew had left behind, was a young black woman, maybe in her early 30s, folding a basket of children's clothes with practiced efficiency while humming softly. She looked up and saw him. The humming stopped. The basket tumbled from her hands, clothes scattering across the floor like autumn leaves. For a long moment, nobody moved. "Who are you?" Andrew heard himself ask, his voice harsher than intended. The woman stood quickly, instinctively positioning herself between Andrew and the children. Her face showed fear but also fierce determination. "I'm Keisha Thompson. I can explain what you're doing in my house." Andrew felt his blood pressure rising, that dangerous tightening starting in his chest. This was exactly what Gerald had warned him about. The little boy ran to hide behind the woman, clutching her leg. The toddler girl, sensing the tension, started to whimper. "Please sir, just listen." Keisha's voice trembled but held steady. This house was abandoned. Nobody had been here in years. The back door lock was broken when I found it. I fixed it. I've been maintaining the property, making improvements, taking care of everything. That doesn't give you the right to break in and live here. I know it was wrong, but I had nowhere else to go. Her voice cracked slightly. My husband died 2 years ago. I lost my job because I couldn't afford childcare. Then I lost my apartment because I couldn't pay rent. We were living in my car for 3 weeks before someone told me about this place." Andrew looked at the little boy's frightened face, at the toddler girl now crying in earnest, at this woman standing with her shoulders back and chin up even as tears started down her cheeks. "I'm calling the police," he said, reaching for his phone. "Mama." The little boy's voice was small and scared. "Are we gonna have to sleep in the car again?" Again, that single word hit Andrew like a physical blow. He looked around the room with new eyes. The house wasn't just occupied, it was cared for. The hardwood floors gleamed. The windows were spotless. Fresh flowers sat in a vase on the table. Through the doorway to the kitchen, he could see herbs growing in pots on the windowsill, and the air smelled like something was baking. This house looked more like a home now than it ever had when it belonged only to him. Andrew ran a hand over his face, feeling suddenly exhausted. "How long have you been here?" 6 months, since early April. 6 months, she'd been living in his house for 6 months while he'd been in Nashville, working himself into a heart attack, not giving this place a single thought. It was now early October. "I'm not a squatter," Keisha said quickly. "Well, legally I am, but I've been taking care of everything. Look at the garden out back, the repairs I've made. I've added value to your property. That still doesn't make it legal, I know it doesn't. But please just give me some time to find another place. 3 weeks, just 3 weeks to save enough for a deposit somewhere." Andrew thought about Gerald's orders. Complete rest, no stress, no complications. Having a homeless woman with 2 children living in his house was the definition of complication. But sending them back to live in a car, that went against something fundamental in him, something that had survived even 30 years of ruthless business dealing. 2 weeks, he heard himself say. "You have 2 weeks to find a place, but I'm staying here too. It's my house and I need it for my recovery." Keisha's knees seemed to buckle with relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Wellington. Andrew Wellington, thank you, Mr. Wellington. We'll stay out of your way, I promise. You can have the master bedroom upstairs. Me and my children, we've been sleeping in the small room off the kitchen. You won't even know we're here." Andrew very much doubted that, but he was too tired to argue further. "Fine. What are their names?" "This is Jamal." She touched the little boy's head gently. "He just turned 6 last month. And this is Zoe. She's 30 months old, 2.5. She'll be 3 in December." An awkward silence filled the room. Andrew didn't know what to do next. The situation felt surreal, like he'd walked into someone else's life by mistake. His phone rang, breaking the tension. Gerald Patterson's cheerful voice came through the speaker. "Andrew, you made it to the house. Remember everything we discussed. No work calls, no checking emails, no stress whatsoever. Light meals, gentle exercise, plenty of rest. Your heart is still healing." "Gerald, there's a situation." "What kind of situation?" The cheerfulness vanished, replaced by professional concern. "Chest pain, difficulty breathing." "No, nothing like that. There are people living in my house. A woman with 2 children." Silence on the other end. Then very carefully, "You're calling the authorities, correct?" Andrew looked at Jamal, who was peeking out from behind his mother, his eyes huge and frightened. Little Zoe had stopped crying and was watching him with wide, curious eyes, one thumb in her mouth. "I gave her 2 weeks to find another place. Andrew, you need absolute peace and quiet. No complications, no strangers, no stressful situations. Your heart can't handle it. One more major incident could be fatal. She'll stay out of my way. It'll be fine." "It won't be fine. You're already stressed, I can hear it in your voice. Your blood pressure is probably spiking right now." "I'll manage it. I'll take my medications, I'll rest, I'll follow all your other orders, but I'm not throwing a homeless woman and her children into the street." Gerald sighed heavily. 2 weeks, that's it. Then they're gone. Or I'm admitting you to supervised care facility whether you like it or not. Your life depends on following my orders. After hanging up, Andrew stood in his own living room feeling like an intruder. Before he could decide what to do next, the front door opened, and an elderly black woman bustled in carrying grocery bags. "Keisha, honey, I brought those things you asked for from the..." She stopped short, seeing Andrew.
Oh my lord.
Miss Dorothy, this is Mr. Wellington, Keisha said quickly. He owns the house. Dorothy set down her bag slowly, her weathered face cycling through surprise, concern, and finally settling on a kind of fierce protectiveness. The owner, after all these years? I didn't abandon the property, Andrew said defensively.
I was busy with work.
So busy you couldn't visit once in 6 years, couldn't hire someone to maintain the place. Dorothy shook her head.
This girl has been a blessing to your property, sir.
Fixed what was broken, planted what was dead, brought life back to these walls, and now you're here to throw her out. I gave her 2 weeks to find another place. 2 weeks, Dorothy's expression hardened. 2 weeks to find affordable housing in this market, with 2 small children. That's not generous, Mr. Wellington. That's cruel dressed up as mercy. Miss Dorothy, please, Keisha interjected. Mr. Wellington doesn't owe us anything. 2 weeks is more than I had any right to expect. You deserve better than 2 weeks.
Maybe.
But it's what I have, and I'm grateful for it. Dorothy looked like she wanted to say more but restrained herself. Well, I better put these groceries away before the milk spoils. She headed toward the kitchen, muttering under her breath about wealthy men and hard hearts. Andrew seized the opportunity to escape upstairs to the master bedroom. He needed space to think, to process what was happening. The room was immaculate. Fresh linens on the bed, curtains cleaned and pressed, everything dusted and organized. On the nightstand sat a small vase with wild flowers and a handwritten note on plain paper. Welcome home. We'll be gone soon. Thank you for your kindness.
Keisha, kindness.
The word felt like an accusation. He hadn't been kind. He'd been backed into a corner by his own discomfort, and chosen what seemed like the path of least resistance. Andrew sat on the edge of the bed, and put his head in his hands. 2 weeks. He just had to survive 2 weeks, and then his peace and quiet would return. Then he could focus entirely on his recovery, on healing his damaged heart and figuring out what came next in his life. But as he sat in that perfectly maintained room, smelling the clean sheets and hearing the soft sounds of domestic life from downstairs, a woman's voice soothing a crying child, water running, the clink of dishes, Andrew felt something he hadn't expected. He felt lonely. For 6 years, this house had been an empty symbol of his failed marriage and abandoned dreams. Now for the first time, it felt alive, and the thought of it returning to emptiness in 2 weeks didn't bring relief. It brought a deep aching sadness he couldn't quite name. Andrew woke on his 4th morning in the house feeling wrong. His head ached, his throat burned, and when he tried to sit up, the room spun sickeningly. He lay back down, his heart racing, but not from cardiac issues. This was something else. He'd made it through 3 days of awkward coexistence. Keisha had been true to her word about staying out of his way. She was up before dawn, left for her first job by 6:30, returned in the afternoon, cooked dinner quietly, put the children to bed early. They'd barely spoken beyond polite greetings, but now he was sick, and he was alone. Andrew reached for his phone to check the time, and knocked over the water glass on his nightstand. The crash brought footsteps running up the stairs. Mr. Wellington. Keisha appeared in his doorway, concern replacing her usual careful distance. Are you all right? I heard. She stopped, taking in his flushed face and glassy eyes. You're sick, just a cold. Andrew managed, though even talking hurt his throat. That's not just a cold, you're burning up. She crossed the room without hesitation, professional instinct overriding their awkward relationship. She pressed the back of her hand to his forehead, and her touch was gentle, practiced. You have a high fever. When did this start? Woke up feeling off. Have you taken your heart medications this morning?
Not yet.
Can't get up. Okay, don't move. I'll get them and some water. She disappeared, and Andrew closed his eyes against the pounding in his head. She returned with his pill organizer, fresh water, a damp cloth, and a thermometer. Take these first, then I'm checking your temperature. You don't have to. You're sick alone, and recovering from a heart attack. Yes, I do have to. Her voice was firm but not unkind. Now take your medications. Andrew complied, too miserable to argue. Keisha produced the thermometer, and took his temperature. 102.4. That's too high. We need to bring this down. I'll be fine. Just need rest. Mr. Wellington, you had a major heart attack 2 months ago. High fever puts enormous stress on your cardiovascular system. You need proper care. She adjusted his pillows with a gentleness that surprised him, placed the cool cloth on his forehead. I'm calling your doctor. No, don't bother him. It's not a bother, it's necessary. She was already dialing, having found Dr. Patterson's number in Andrew's recent calls. 10 minutes later, after Keisha had explained the symptoms to Gerald in clear, concise medical terms that suggested she'd done this before, she handed the phone to Andrew. Andrew listened to me carefully. Gerald's voice was deadly serious. Your body is fighting an infection while trying to heal a damaged heart. That's dangerous. Keisha needs to monitor you closely. Temperature every 2 hours. Watch for any cardiac symptoms. If your fever goes above 103, if you have any chest pain, difficulty breathing, or irregular heartbeat, you go straight to the ER. Understood? Understood. Put Keisha back on. Andrew handed her the phone. She listened intently, asked intelligent questions, made detailed notes. Yes, doctor. Every 2 hours, I'll set alarms. Acetaminophen every 4 hours, not ibuprofen because of the heart medication. I'll watch for confusion, chest pain, irregular pulse. If anything changes, we'll call immediately or go to the ER. After she hung up, she looked at Andrew with an expression he couldn't quite read, determination mixed with something softer. Dr. Patterson says you need to stay in bed, take fever reducers every 4 hours, drink lots of fluids, and be monitored constantly. I'll be checking on you every 2 hours, more often if needed. I'll be fine alone. You have the children to care for. You have work. Miss Dorothy's downstairs with the children. I already called my jobs and told them I have a family emergency. They'll manage without me for a few days. She pulled the chair from the corner and positioned it beside the bed. Whether you like it or not, Mr. Wellington, you're stuck with me as your nurse. But your jobs, you can't afford to miss work. Something flickered across her face. Shame, fear, resignation. I can't afford for you to die in your own house either. What do you think happens to me and my children if you die here? They investigate, find out I've been squatting, take my children while they sort out the legality. I'm not risking that. The brutal honesty of it should have offended Andrew. Instead, he found it strangely comforting. At least she was being real with him. Okay, he said quietly. Thank you. Over the next hours, Andrew drifted in and out of feverish sleep. Each time he woke, Keisha was there, checking his temperature, helping him drink water, changing the cloth on his forehead, adjusting his blankets with hands that were surprisingly gentle. She was professional but distant, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of caring for him but too determined to let him suffer alone. By evening, his fever had climbed to 103.1. Keisha's face tightened with worry as she checked the thermometer. We're close to ER territory. I'm going to try a lukewarm bath to bring it down. Can you walk if I help you? I think so. Getting Andrew to the bathroom was an exercise in dignity stripping. He was weak, dizzy, had to lean heavily on this woman who barely knew him. She was matter-of-fact about it, treating him with the same efficient care she probably gave her children. In the bathroom, she ran the water, testing the temperature carefully. Not cold, just lukewarm. I'm going to step outside while you get in. Call me when you're settled, and I'll come back to monitor you. Don't lock the door. Andrew managed to undress and lower himself into the tub. The water felt shocking after the fever heat. Okay, he called weakly. Keisha returned, averting her eyes respectfully but staying close enough to help if needed. She sat on the closed toilet lid with a timer. 15 minutes, then we'll check your temperature again. You don't have to stay. Yes, I do. If you pass out in the bath, I need to be here. She pulled out her phone and pretended to read something, giving him privacy while remaining vigilant. Andrew closed his eyes, too exhausted to be embarrassed. After a moment, he heard himself asking, "Why are you really doing this? I told you, can't afford the consequences if you die. There's more to it than that." Keisha was quiet for a long moment. "My father died when I was 17. Heart attack, just like you had. He was only 46. One day he was fine, the next day he collapsed at work." Her voice was carefully neutral. "By the time my mother and I got to the hospital, he was already gone. We never got to say goodbye, never got to help him, never got to do anything." She paused. "When I saw you this morning, sick and alone, all I could think about was my daddy. How he died alone at his workplace, how nobody was there to help him. So no, Mr. Wellington, I'm not going to let you suffer alone or die while I'm in the same house, regardless of what happens after, because I couldn't save my daddy, but maybe I can help you. Andrew opened his eyes to see tears on her face that she quickly wiped away. I'm sorry, he said, about your father. Me too. She stood and checked the timer. 3 more minutes, then we're checking your temperature. The bath worked. His fever dropped to 101.8, still high, but not emergency territory. Keisha helped him back to bed, gave him fresh pajamas to change into, and brought him plain toast and broth. You need to eat something, just a little. Andrew managed a few bites. Keisha sat in the chair beside his bed, watching him with the same careful attention he'd seen her give her children. You should rest, he said. You've been taking care of me for hours. I'll rest when your fever breaks properly. Doctor's orders. But her eyes were heavy with exhaustion. At least lie down. The bed is big enough for both of us to rest without. He stopped, realizing how that sounded. Keisha's lips twitched slightly. I'll sleep in the chair. It's fine. But as the night wore on and she kept her 2-hour vigil, waking to check his temperature each time, Andrew watched her through fever-clouded eyes, and saw something he hadn't expected. Dedication, compassion. A woman who'd been treated like an intruder, but who responded to his illness with the same fierce care she'd probably given her dying father, determined not to lose another person on her watch. On the second night, Andrew's fever spiked again to 103.2. Keisha didn't hesitate. She woke him, helped him to another lukewarm bath, stayed with him through his shivering and discomfort. I'm sorry, Andrew mumbled through chattering teeth. This is humiliating. No, it's not. It's just being human and sick. Everyone needs help sometimes. She wrapped a towel around his shoulders. My daddy used to say that accepting help with grace is harder than giving it. He was right. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was worked construction his whole life, never made much money, but he was rich in all the ways that mattered. He took care of people. Her voice softened with memory. When neighbors needed help, he was there. When someone's car broke down, he fixed it. When families couldn't afford repairs on their houses, he did the work for free. He sounds like a good man. The best. My mama died when I was 10, and he raised me alone. Worked double shifts to keep us afloat, never complained, always made sure I had what I needed. She helped Andrew back to bed. He taught me that taking care of people isn't a burden, it's a privilege. So no, Mr. Wellington, taking care of you isn't humiliating for either of us. It's just what we do for each other when someone needs help. By the third morning, Andrew's fever finally broke. He woke clear-headed for the first time, feeling weak but human again. Keisha was asleep in the chair beside his bed, her head at an awkward angle that would give her a terrible neckache. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her clothes were rumpled from 3 days of constant care. She'd barely left his room, except to check on her children, who Miss Dorothy had been watching around the clock. Keisha, Andrew said softly. She startled awake, immediately alert. What's wrong? Do you need something? I'm okay. Better. Much better. You should rest properly. Let me check your temperature first. She took it, her movements automatic with exhaustion. 98.6. That's normal. Thank God. She slumped back in the chair, relief washing over her face. When did you last sleep properly? I've been sleeping. In a chair. That doesn't count. Andrew tried to sit up and managed it without dizziness. You should go to your own bed. I can manage now. Are you sure? You're still weak, I'm sure. And Keisha, thank you for everything. You didn't have to do all this. She stood gathering the damp cloths and empty water glasses scattered around the room. Yes, I did. Couldn't do anything else. Why not? I'm essentially kicking you out. And he tried to remember what day it was in 11 days. Most people would be happy to let me manage alone. Keisha paused in the doorway, her back to him. When she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Because when my daddy died, I wasn't there. Because my husband died at work and I was home with Jamal and I couldn't help him. Because I'm tired of people dying alone when I could have done something. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. Because you're a human being who needed help. And yes, I'm terrified of what happens if you die here, but more than that, I just couldn't let you suffer alone. That's all. That's the only reason I needed. She left before he could respond, and Andrew sat in bed thinking about a woman who'd been shown no mercy by life but who still had mercy to give. Who'd lost her father and her husband both suddenly, both without being able to help, and who'd responded to his illness with a desperation to save what she could. He thought about 3 days and nights of her gentle hands changing cool cloths, her patient voice reminding him to drink water, her vigilant presence ensuring he didn't deteriorate into dangerous territory. And he thought about how wrong he'd been to see her as just a squatter, just a problem to be solved. Downstairs, alone in the kitchen while Miss Dorothy supervised the children in the living room, Keisha finally allowed herself to break down. She sat at the table and cried silently, overwhelmed by exhaustion and emotions she'd been holding back for 3 days. She'd been terrified Andrew would die. Terrified she'd wake up to find him cold. Terrified she'd have to call an ambulance and watch another man slip away while she stood helpless. The fear had kept her awake even when exhaustion screamed for rest. But beneath the fear was something else, something that shamed her even as she couldn't deny it. She'd taken care of him like he was her own father. In her fever-addled vigilance, somewhere around the second night, she'd stopped seeing Mr. Wellington, the property owner, and started seeing an old man who reminded her painfully of her daddy in those last months before he died. The same silver hair. The same way he'd looked small and vulnerable in sleep. The same trust in his eyes when she'd helped him to the bathroom. The same gratitude in his voice when she'd brought him water. She'd been caring for the ghost of her father as much as for the actual man upstairs. And that scared her because it meant she'd gotten emotionally involved. It meant the 2 weeks weren't just a practical deadline anymore, they were a ticking clock on a relationship she'd never meant to form. Oh God, she whispered to the empty kitchen. What have I done? Because somewhere in 3 days of intimate caregiving, of seeing him vulnerable and weak, of touching his fevered skin and helping him through humiliating necessity, she'd stopped being able to see him as a stranger. He'd become a person, someone who mattered. And in 11 days she'd have to leave him, take her children, and disappear into whatever uncertain future she could cobble together. The thought hurt more than it should have. I can't get attached, she told herself firmly, wiping her eyes. I can't afford to care about him. He's not my father, he's not my responsibility. In 11 days this is over. But even as she said the words she knew it was too late. She'd already crossed a line she couldn't uncross. Caring for him had changed something fundamental between them. And she had no idea what came next. Meanwhile little Zoe toddled into the kitchen, her hair puffed slightly askew from napping, dragging her stuffed bear. Mama sad. Keisha quickly wiped her face and pulled her daughter onto her lap. Mama's just tired, baby. Mr. Andrew okay? Yes honey, Mr. Andrew is feeling much better. Good. I like Mr. Andrew. He nice. Zoe snuggled against her mother's chest, her small hand patting Keisha's arm comfortingly. Can we stay here forever? Keisha felt her heart break a little. We'll see baby, we'll see. That evening, when Andrew came downstairs for the first time since getting sick, walking slowly but steadily, he found Keisha in the kitchen preparing dinner. She looked exhausted but was pushing through it, moving between stove and counter with automatic efficiency. You should be resting, he said. I'm fine. Children need dinner. Let me help. She turned to look at him, surprise evident. You should be in bed. I've been in bed for 3 days, I'm going stir crazy. He pulled out a chair at the table, lowering himself carefully. What can I do sitting down? After a moment's hesitation, Keisha handed him a bowl of green beans. Snap the ends off these. They worked in companionable silence for a while, Jamal coloring at the other end of the table, Zoe in her high chair playing with blocks and talking to herself in that stream of consciousness way toddlers have. It was the most domestic scene Andrew had experienced in decades. How are you feeling? Keisha asked, not looking at him. Weak, but better. Thanks to you. Just did what needed doing. It was more than that. Andrew snapped another bean, choosing his words carefully. You took care of me like family would. Better than most family would, honestly. Keisha's hands stilled on the potatoes she was peeling. My daddy taught me that everyone deserves to be cared for when they're sick. Doesn't matter who they are. Still, I'm grateful, and I'm sorry about your father. About losing him so suddenly. 20 years ago this past May. Still feels like yesterday sometimes. She resumed peeling, her movements mechanical. He'd be 66 now. About your age. The comparison hung in the air between them. What was he like? Andrew asked. Kind, patient, tough when he needed to be but mostly just present. He showed up for people. That's what I remember most. He just showed up, no matter what. She glanced at Jamal and Zoe. That's what I'm trying to teach my children. That showing up matters more than being perfect. Mama, Jamal called out. Is Mr. Wellington gonna die like Daddy died? Keisha's face went pale. No baby, Mr. Wellington is getting better. He just had a bad cold. But you were scared. I heard you crying. I was tired, that's all. Everything's okay now. She shot Andrew an apologetic look. Little Zoe, not fully understanding but sensing something important, dropped her blocks and reached her arms toward Andrew. Mr. Andrew not die. Andrew felt something tighten in his chest. He stood carefully and moved to her high chair. I'm not going to die, sweetheart. I promise I'm getting better. Zoe studied his face with those serious toddler eyes, then patted his cheek gently with her small hand. Okay, you nice. She picked up a block and offered it to him. For you, make you better. Andrew accepted the block, feeling unexpectedly moved by this small gesture of comfort from a 2-year-old. Thank you, Zoe. This does make me feel better. She beamed at him and went back to her blocks satisfied. After dinner, while Keisha bathed the children, Andrew sat on the back porch despite the October chill. He needed air, needed space to think about what had happened over the past 3 days. He'd been completely vulnerable, dependent on a woman who owed him nothing, who had every reason to let him suffer. And she'd responded with a level of care that spoke of something deeper than self-preservation. She'd cared for him like she'd care for family. Raymond appeared at the fence, as if summoned by Andrew's thoughts. Heard you were sick. Feeling better. Much better. That Keisha, she barely left your side for 3 days. Dorothy said she was running on 2 hours of sleep, checking on you every couple hours through the nights. She told me she couldn't let me die here. For practical reasons. Raymond chuckled. If you believe that's all it was, you're not as smart as I thought. What do you mean? I mean that woman lost her daddy to a sudden heart attack when she was 17. Lost her husband the same way 2 years ago. You think tending to a sick old man with a bad heart was just practical for her? She was terrified, son. Terrified of watching another person die. The words hit Andrew harder than expected. She mentioned her father, said I reminded her of him. I bet you do. About the same age he was when he died. Similar look about you. And now here you are, sick with a heart condition, needing care. Raymond shook his head. She probably hasn't been that scared since her husband passed. Taking care of you wasn't practical, it was personal. After Raymond left, Andrew sat in the darkness thinking about trauma and triggers, about a young woman who'd lost too many people too suddenly, about what it must have cost her emotionally to care for him through those feverish days. He felt something shift inside him. Not guilt exactly, but a profound sense of responsibility. She'd given him something precious without asking for anything in return. 3 days of compassionate care that had probably cost her more than she'd admit. How could he pay that back by forcing her out in 11 days? The next morning, Andrew found Keisha alone in the kitchen before the children woke. She was sitting at the table surrounded by apartment listings, a notepad covered in calculations beside her. Finding anything? He asked. She jumped, not having heard him come down. Some possibilities. Nothing great. He sat down across from her. Can I see? Hesitantly she showed him. The listings were all in questionable neighborhoods, far from Jamal's school, barely affordable even with her 3 jobs that together brought in $900 a month after taxes. This one's $700 a month, she explained. If I can save another $400 in the next 11 days, I'll have about $800 total. It's not enough for first month, last month, and deposit, that's $2,100 total. But maybe I can negotiate, pay half up front, and the rest over a few months. What about after you move in? Food, utilities, gas, I'll figure it out. I always do. But her voice lacked conviction. Andrew looked at the listing more closely. The neighborhood had high crime rates. The apartment building looked decrepit in the photos. This isn't safe for children. It's what I can afford. What if you had more time? Could you find something better? Keisha met his eyes warily. Are you offering more time? I'm considering it. Why? Because I took care of you when you were sick. You don't owe me anything for that. I did it because, she stopped, looking away. Because I couldn't do anything else. Because you needed help and I was there and that was reason enough. Andrew reached across the table and touched her hand gently. Then let me help you now. Not because I owe you, but because you need help and I'm here. That's reason enough. Keisha pulled her hand back, but not angrily. For how long? As long as you need to find something adequate and safe. Not this. He gestured at the listings. Something actually appropriate for you and your children. Why would you do that? Because you showed me who you really are these past few days. Not a squatter or a problem, but a person with character and compassion. Because I've spent 3 days thinking about what kind of man threatens a woman like you with police and deadlines. He paused. And because I don't like the answer. Tears started down Keisha's face. I don't understand you. I'm not sure I understand myself. But I know that 2 weeks was never enough time. I was just trying to minimize my own discomfort, not thinking about what you actually needed. So how much time are you offering? No deadline. Stay until you find something truly adequate. And Keisha, stop looking at places like this. He pushed the listings away. You deserve better than rats and crime and fear. She wiped her eyes quickly, that shield of fierce independence slamming back into place. I can't accept open-ended charity. I need to pay rent, contribute something. We'll figure out an arrangement. Something that lets you keep your dignity while also giving you the space to breathe and plan properly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll stop looking at terrible apartments. Say you'll give yourself time to find something right. Keisha nodded slowly. Okay, thank you. But as Andrew went back upstairs to rest, still weak from his illness, he couldn't shake Raymond's words. She'd cared for him like he was her father. She'd been terrified of losing him the way she'd lost the other men in her life. That created a connection whether they acknowledged it or not. And Andrew, who'd spent 30 years avoiding exactly this kind of emotional entanglement, found himself wondering what came next. How did you move forward when someone had seen you at your most vulnerable? When you'd crossed invisible lines that couldn't be uncrossed? He didn't have answers, but he knew, with absolute certainty, that letting Keisha and her children leave in 11 days was no longer an option he could stomach. Something had changed during those 3 fevered days. He just wasn't sure yet what it meant. 2 days later, Andrew insisted on taking Keisha and the children grocery shopping. You've been feeding me from your limited supplies for a week. Let me restock the kitchen properly. At the store, Keisha moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency, reaching for store brands and comparing unit prices. Andrew watched her put a jar of peanut butter in the cart, then take it out and replace it with a cheaper brand. Why did you do that? This one's 40 cents cheaper. But do you prefer the other one? Doesn't matter what I prefer, matters what I can afford. Andrew reached past her and put the more expensive brand back in the cart. Today you can afford what you prefer. Zoe, sitting in the cart seat, clapped her small hands. Yay, good peanut butter. Her vocabulary was limited but enthusiastic. At the checkout, the total came to $214. Keisha's face went pale as she looked at the register. That's too much. I need to put some things back. I'm paying. No, you're not. I can't. Keisha, you've been feeding me for a week. You took care of me when I was sick. Let me buy groceries. That's different. How is it different? But she couldn't answer, and Andrew paid while she stood there looking miserable, shame radiating from her rigid posture. Zoe, sensing her mother's distress, reached out and patted Keisha's arm. Mama, okay? In the car on the way home, she was silent. Andrew finally asked, what's wrong? Nothing. That's obviously not true. Keisha stared out the window. You don't understand what it's like. What it feels like to have someone else pay for your food. To be reduced to accepting handouts like you're some kind of charity case. It's groceries, not a handout. It's the same thing. It's you having money, and me having nothing. You being able to help and me being helpless. You being strong, and me being weak. You're not weak. Taking care of me while working 3 jobs and raising 2 children. That's not weakness. Then why do I feel so ashamed? The words burst out of her. Why do I hate myself every time you help me? Why does every kindness feel like proof that I've failed? Andrew pulled into the driveway but didn't get out. Failed at what? At everything. At being a wife, David died and left me with nothing. At being a mother, I couldn't even keep a roof over my children's heads without breaking the law. At being an adult, I'm 33 years old, and I can't afford $200 worth of groceries. She was crying now, not bothering to hide it. Do you know what my daddy would say if he saw me now, living in someone else's house, taking handouts, barely scraping by? He'd probably say you're surviving impossible circumstances with dignity and determination. No, he'd be ashamed. He taught me to stand on my own feet, to work for what I need, to never be a burden. And look at me, I'm the definition of a burden. You're not. Yes, I am. She turned to face him, her face twisted with self-loathing. I'm a broke widow squatting in a stranger's house, working 3 jobs that don't pay enough, raising children I can barely feed, and now accepting charity from a man who was supposed to kick me out. How is that anything other than pathetic? It's survival, it's failure, and the worst part is, I need it. I hate accepting your help, but I need it so desperately that I can't refuse. I hate myself for taking the groceries, but I took them anyway because my children need to eat. I hate depending on you, but I'm dependent anyway because I have no other choice. She wiped her face roughly. That's what shame feels like, Mr. Wellington. It feels like drowning while someone throws you a rope and you hate the rope, but you grab it anyway because the alternative is worse. From the back seat, Jamal's small voice broke in. Mama, don't cry, it's okay. Zoe, not understanding but upset to see her mother crying, started whimpering. Mama sad. Mama sad. Andrew didn't know what to say. In the business world, he dealt with ambition and greed and competition. But this raw, painful shame was outside his experience. I had a daughter once, he found himself saying. Or almost did. Margaret was pregnant. We found out 2 months after we got married. I was 26, building my first property development. I told Margaret we should wait, that it wasn't the right time, that we should focus on the business first. She agreed to terminate the pregnancy. Keisha looked at him, shock replacing some of the shame in her expression. For the next 15 years, every time she brought up children, I had another excuse. The business needed me, we needed to save more money, the timing wasn't right. Until one day, she stopped asking, and 2 years after that, she left. She said I'd killed our family before it ever existed, that I'd chosen buildings over babies. Andrew's voice was rough with old pain. She was right. And 30 years later, I'm 67 years old with no children, no family, nothing but money that buys me exactly nothing that matters. Why are you telling me this? Because I know about shame. About looking at your life and seeing all the ways you failed to be who you were supposed to be, about hating yourself for the choices you made or didn't make. He turned to face her. But here's what I've learned. Shame is just fear with a different face. You're not ashamed because you're weak. You're ashamed because you're afraid. Afraid you'll never get back on your feet. Afraid your children will suffer because of your choices. Afraid you're proving right everyone who ever doubted you. That doesn't make it better. No, but maybe it makes it human. Maybe everyone who's been knocked down feels exactly what you're feeling. The question isn't whether you feel shame, it's what you do with it. Keisha was quiet for a long moment. What do I do with it? You could let it paralyze you, convince you to refuse all help until you're drowning. Or you could swallow it, accept the help you need, and use the stability it provides to build something better. Grace isn't just accepting help. It's accepting yourself as someone who needs help. I don't know how to do that, neither do I, but maybe we can figure it out together. They sat in the car, until Jamal started getting restless in the back seat, and Zoe announced loudly, I need potty. Now, then they unloaded the groceries together, and Keisha put them away with hands that still trembled slightly. That night, after the children were asleep, Keisha sat alone in her small room, and wrote in the journal she'd kept since David died. The entry was brutal in its honesty. I hate myself today. Hate that I let him pay for groceries. Hate that I needed him to. Hate that I'm living in his house, and eating his food and dependent on his kindness. Hate that my children are learning that mama can't provide for them alone. But the thing I hate most is that underneath the shame, I'm grateful. So grateful it makes me sick. Grateful he's letting us stay. Grateful he got better instead of dying. Grateful that for the first time in 2 years, I'm not terrified about where we'll sleep tomorrow. Daddy would be so ashamed of me. He raised me to be strong and independent, and I failed at both. I'm weak and dependent, and barely holding it together. David married a strong woman.
If he could see me now, he'd be disappointed. I don't know how to do this. Don't know how to accept help without hating myself for needing it. Don't know how to be grateful without feeling pathetic. Don't know how to let someone care about us without waiting for the moment they change their mind. Mr. Wellington says shame is just fear. Maybe he's right. Maybe I'm just terrified that if I let myself rely on him even a little bit, he'll disappear like everyone else has. And then I'll be back to drowning, except this time I'll have gotten used to breathing again. That's the scariest thing about hope. It makes you vulnerable. And I'm so tired of being vulnerable. She closed the journal and lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to her children breathe in their sleep, Jamal's steady rhythm, and Zoe's softer, faster breathing, wondering how to be strong enough to accept weakness. 3 weeks after Andrew's illness, he found Keisha in the garden, weeding the vegetable beds with fierce concentration. It was late October now, almost a month since he'd arrived. The 2-week deadline had come and gone, unmentioned by both of them. "Can we talk?" he asked. She sat back on her heels, pulling off her gardening gloves. "About me leaving, about you staying. But not like this. What does that mean?" Andrew sat down on the garden bench, gesturing for her to join him. After a moment's hesitation she did. "I've been thinking a lot since I got sick. About what matters, what doesn't. About the kind of life I've lived, versus the kind I want to live going forward." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I spent 30 years building an empire, and ended up alone. No wife, no children, no family beyond some distant cousins I haven't spoken to in decades. I told myself there would be time for family later. There wasn't. I don't understand what this has to do with me." "Everything. Because when I found you here with your children, taking care of my forgotten house, surviving against impossible odds, when I saw that, I saw something I'd been missing my whole life. Purpose beyond profit, connection beyond transactions, family." Keisha stood up abruptly. "Mr. Wellington, if you're about to offer me money, or some kind of financial arrangement, I'm not. I'm offering family." She turned to stare at him. "What? I want to adopt you, legally, formally, as my daughter, which would make Jamal and Zoe my grandchildren." For a long moment, Keisha just stared, then she laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "You want to adopt me, a grown woman you've known for a month? Yes, that's insane. Maybe, but is it wrong? Yes. People don't just adopt adults because what? Because they feel guilty, because they're lonely, because they want to play savior to some poor homeless woman. No, because they want to be family to each other. Because I need to finally be the father I never was, and you need to be someone's daughter again. Because your children need a grandfather and stability, and I need people who matter more than my bank account." Keisha shook her head. "This is crazy. You barely know me."
"I know you well enough. I know you're strong, dedicated, caring. I know you work 3 jobs while raising 2 children and still found time to nurse a stranger through illness. I know you'd rather break into an abandoned house than separate your children in a shelter system. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. You know I'm a squatter who committed crimes to survive. That's what you know about me. I know you're a mother who did whatever was necessary to protect her children. There's no shame in that." Keisha started pacing. "And what happens when you realize this was a mistake? When you wake up and think, what was I thinking adopting some broke black woman and her kids? When you get tired of us, tired of the noise and mess and responsibility, then what? That won't happen. You can't know that. People change their minds. People leave. People die." Her voice broke. "Everyone leaves eventually, and I can't let my children get attached to another person who's going to disappear. I'm not going to disappear. You could die. Your heart could give out. You could decide this was a terrible idea. You could." Keisha stopped. Andrew stood and moved toward her. "Yes, I could die. I'm 67 with a damaged heart. I can't promise I'll live another 20 years. But I can promise that whatever time I have I'll spend it being your father and their grandfather. I can promise that legally, officially, you'll be my heir, my daughter, that even if I die tomorrow you and the children will be secure. This is about your money. This is about family. The money is just a tool to provide security. What I'm offering is belonging, being part of something permanent, having someone choose you not because they have to, but because they want to." Keisha sank down onto the bench, her face in her hands. Why me? Why us? There are thousands of families who need help. Why ours? Andrew sat beside her. Because you're the family I found. Because in 1 month you've made this house feel more like home than it has in 6 years. Because your children already call me Mr. Andrews like I'm someone important in their lives. Because when I was sick you took care of me like I mattered. I took care of you because you reminded me of my daddy. Because I couldn't save him when he died and I thought maybe I could save you. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. That doesn't mean we should be family, doesn't it? You cared for me like family would. You put aside everything, your fear, your pride, your resentment to make sure I got better. That's what family does. That's what decent humans do. No, decent humans would have called an ambulance and let professionals handle it. You stayed by my bedside for 3 days, monitoring me every 2 hours, helping me through humiliating necessities, refusing to leave my side. That's not professional care. That's personal care. That's love. Keisha wiped her eyes roughly. Don't call it love. It was obligation. Fine, call it obligation. But it created a bond whether you want to admit it or not. We're not strangers anymore. We're two people who've seen each other vulnerable and chose to care anyway. That's as good a foundation for family as biology ever was. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. If I say yes and I'm not saying I will, what happens? How would it even work? We file papers for adult adoption. It's legal in Tennessee, takes about 3 months to finalize. During that time we'd live as we've been living, figuring out how to be family to each other. Once it's finalized, I'd adopt the children as my grandchildren with your permission. We'd create legal documents protecting all of you, trusts for their education, provisions in my will, everything properly structured. And if it doesn't work, if we can't figure out how to be family, then we'd already be legally bound, so we'd have to make it work. That's what family does. They don't give up just because it's hard. That's terrifying. Yes, but maybe also exactly what both of us need. Commitment that can't be taken back. Permanence instead of temporary solutions. He looked at her directly. I'm tired of temporary, Keisha. I'm tired of empty houses and empty relationships and empty success. I want something real, even if it's messy and complicated and scary. I want to be your father. Will you let me? Keisha stood and walked to the edge of the garden, looking out at the house she'd been caring for, the home she'd created from an abandoned building. I need time to think about it. This is too big to decide right now. Take all the time you need. But Keisha, whatever you decide, you're not leaving in 2 weeks. That deadline is gone. You have a home here for as long as you need it, whether you become my daughter or not. After he went inside, Keisha stayed in the garden until darkness fell, thinking about family and belonging and the terrifying vulnerability of letting someone matter. For 5 days Keisha said nothing about Andrew's proposal. She moved through the house quietly, helping where she could, watching Andrew with an expression he couldn't quite read. On the 5th evening she knocked on his bedroom door after the children were asleep. Can we talk? Of course. They sat in the chairs by his window. Keisha twisted her hands in her lap, clearly struggling with what to say. I have questions about the adoption. Real questions, not just arguments. Ask anything. If you adopt me, what happens to my independence? Do you get to control my life? Tell me how to raise my children. No. Adult adoption gives you rights as my daughter, not obligations beyond what any family member owes another. You'd still make your own choices about everything. Your career, your children's upbringing, where you live, all of it. And the children, if you adopt them as grandchildren, do I lose parental authority? Absolutely not. We'd file for you to retain full parental rights with me as legal grandfather. You're their mother always. I'd just be their grandfather with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. What about money? I need to understand exactly how that works. I'd establish education trusts for both children, enough to cover college, graduate school if they want, and a financial cushion as they enter adulthood. For you I'd provide a living stipend so you can finish school and train for a career without working 3 low-wage jobs. The house would become ours jointly, and you'd be named as my primary heir in my will. How much money are we talking about? My estate is approximately $3.8 billion. If I died tomorrow, it would all go to you. Keisha's eyes widened. $3.8 billion, with a B? Yes. I know that's overwhelming. Overwhelming doesn't begin to cover it. I've never had more than $1,000 at once in my entire life. I can't even imagine that much money. You wouldn't have to manage it alone. You'd have financial advisors, attorneys, accountants, and I'd spend whatever time we have teaching you how it all works. Keisha stood and paced to the window. Here's what I keep thinking about. David's parents, Gerald and Linda, they've been calling more often. They want to come visit the children, and I know them. I know they're looking for reasons to say I'm an unfit mother. Do you think they'd try for custody? Maybe. Linda said at David's funeral that the children deserved every advantage, and they certainly have advantages. Big house in Dallas, financial stability, married couple, all the things judges look for. But you're their mother. A mother who was homeless, who broke into someone's house, who works 3 minimum wage jobs and can barely pay for groceries. They could make a case that I can't provide adequately. But if you were my legal daughter before they tried anything. Exactly. If I was your daughter, if the children had a grandfather with resources, if we had legal family structure and stability, it would be much harder for them to claim I'm unfit. She turned from the window. I'm not going to lie and say that's not part of why I'm considering this. The protection it offers. I'd be disappointed if you didn't consider practical factors. This isn't about romantic love or even deep affection yet. It's about two people meeting each other's needs in a way that makes sense for both. I'm also considering it because, she paused, choosing words carefully, because I miss having a father, because my children need a grandfather and male role model, because you remind me of my daddy in ways that hurt and heal at the same time, because when I took care of you when you were sick, it felt right in a way nothing has felt right since David died. So what's holding you back? Fear. Terror, actually. Fear that I'll let myself believe in this, believe in you, and then you'll die or change your mind or disappear like everyone else has. Fear that my children will love you and lose you and be damaged by another loss. Fear that I'm making a desperate decision that'll haunt us all. Andrew stood and moved to stand beside her at the window. I can't promise I won't die. My heart is damaged. I'm old. At best I've got maybe 20 years left, possibly less. But I can promise that while I'm alive, I'll show up. Every day, every school event, every scraped knee, every celebration and every crisis. That's what family does. And if you get sick again, if your heart fails, then you'll be legally my daughter with full inheritance rights. You and the children will be secure no matter what. That's why we do the legal paperwork, to protect you even from my mortality. Keisha was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark yard. Can I ask you something honestly? Always. Are you doing this out of guilt? Out of some need to save someone to make up for your failed marriage and lack of children? Andrew thought carefully. Partly. Maybe. I can't deny that becoming your father would fill a void in my life. But that's not a bad thing, Keisha. All relationships are about mutual need. You need security and family support. I need purpose and connection. We're not using each other, we're helping each other. What if I say yes and then I'm terrible at being your daughter? What if I can't figure out how to let you be a father to me? Then we'll figure it out together, just like real families do. Keisha turned from the window and met his eyes. I want conditions, things in writing, such as, first I want to finish college and get a real career. I won't just be a dependent daughter. I need my own identity and purpose beyond being your heir. Agreed. I want that for you. Second, we tell people the truth. No pretending this is some long-lost biological relationship. It's adult adoption for practical and emotional reasons. We don't lie about it. Of course. Third, and this is the most important one, you have to actually be present in the children's lives. Not just write checks from a distance. Show up for school events. Teach them things. Discipline them when needed. Be a real grandfather. If you're going to do this, you do it completely. I want that more than anything. And fourth, if this isn't working, if you regret it, you promise to tell me honestly. Don't just disappear emotionally while staying legally bound. We communicate even when it's hard. I promise all of it. Keisha took a deep breath. Then yes, let's do this crazy thing. Let's become family. They shook hands formally, sealing the agreement. Then awkwardly, Keisha hugged him briefly.
the first time they'd embraced. "Thank you for choosing us," she whispered. "Thank you for letting me be part of your family." The next morning, Andrew called his attorney Marcus Price. "Marcus, I need you to draw up adoption papers. Adult adoption under Tennessee law. I'm adopting Keisha Thompson, age 33, as my legal daughter." There was a long pause. "Andrew, this is highly unusual. Are you certain?" "Completely certain. Once this is finalized, she's legally your daughter with full inheritance rights. There's no easy reversal." "I don't want a reversal, that's the point." "All right. I'll start the paperwork. We'll need background checks for both parties, home studies, court appearances. The process typically takes 3 to 4 months. Can we expedite?" "Why the urgency?" Andrew explained about David's parents and the potential custody threat. "That does qualify as urgent circumstances. I can file for an expedited hearing. Might get it done in 8 to 10 weeks instead of 3 months. Do it. Whatever it takes." After the call, Andrew found Keisha had already told the children. "So you're going to be my grandpa? Like for real?" Jamal's eyes were wide. "If the judge says yes, then yes. I'll be your grandfather legally and officially. What do I call you?" "Whatever feels right to you." Jamal thought seriously for a moment. "Can I call you Grandpa, Andrew?" Andrew felt tears prick his eyes. "I would be honored." "Okay, Grandpa Andrew." The boy tested the words then grinned. "I like it. I never had a grandpa before. Well, I got Grandpa Gerald in Texas, but we only see him at Christmas sometimes." "Well, now you'll have a grandpa who lives right here with you." Little Zoe, who'd been playing nearby, toddled over and grabbed Andrew's leg. "Grandpa," she announced, testing out the new word. "That's right, sweetheart. Grandpa." The toddler beamed up at him, then held up her stuffed bear. "Bear, say hi, Grandpa." Andrew knelt down to her level, his heart unexpectedly full. "Hello, Bear. Nice to meet you." Zoe giggled delightedly and hugged both the bear and Andrew's neck in one enthusiastic embrace, her little arms barely reaching around. Keisha watched from the doorway, tears streaming down her face. Tears of relief, hope, terror, gratitude, all mixed together in a way she couldn't separate. She just agreed to become this man's daughter, to legally bind her life and her children's lives to his. It was the bravest and most terrifying thing she'd done since David died. "Please God," she thought, "don't let me regret this. Don't let him regret this. Don't let this be another loss waiting to happen." But watching Andrew with her children, listening seriously to Jamal's excited chatter, gently accepting Zoe's toddler affection, she felt something she hadn't felt in 2 years. She felt hope, and hope, terrifying as it was, felt better than the crushing weight of doing everything alone. The adoption paperwork was invasive. Background checks, financial disclosures, home studies where social workers came to observe how they interacted, interviews that probed into their motivations and family histories. "Miss Thompson, why are you agreeing to be adopted by Mr. Wellington?" the social worker Helen Rodriguez asked during their first official interview in early November. Keisha had rehearsed this answer. "Because I need family support and he's offering it in a meaningful way. Because my children need a grandfather and stability. Because after my husband died, I've been alone in ways that made basic survival nearly impossible. This offers all of us security and belonging. And you don't find it strange to be adopted as an adult." "I find it unusual, but not wrong. My father died when I was 17. I've missed having a father for 16 years. This gives me that relationship again." Helen made notes. "Mr. Wellington, can you explain your motivation?" Andrew answered honestly. "I spent my entire adult life building a business empire while neglecting family. My wife left me because I wouldn't make time for children. I ended up alone at 67 with billions of dollars and no one to share it with. When I met Keisha and her children, I saw a chance to finally be the family man I'd always postponed becoming. Some people might say you're trying to buy a family. Some people would be wrong. I'm making a permanent legal commitment to be family to each other. That's not buying, that's choosing. And choice is more meaningful than biology. Mr. Wellington, you had a serious heart attack recently. What happens to Miss Thompson and her children if you die soon?" "They inherit my entire estate. They're financially secure for life." But more importantly, Keisha will have had time with a father figure, time to finish school and establish a career, time to build a foundation that doesn't disappear if I do. Helen interviewed them separately and together. She visited the house multiple times, observing Andrew teaching Jamal chess, watching Keisha prepare meals while Zoe helped by playing with measuring cups, seeing how naturally the four of them had begun functioning as a family unit. She spoke to Miss Dorothy, Raymond, Jamal's teacher, and others who'd witnessed their relationship develop. They're real, Dorothy told Helen firmly. Not playing at being family. That man loves those children like they're his own grandchildren. And Keisha has stopped looking like a scared rabbit waiting for disaster. They need each other. 6 weeks into the process, in mid-November, David's parents called to say they were coming for Thanksgiving. We want to spend time with the children, Linda said, her voice tight. It's been too long. After the call, Keisha sat down heavily at the kitchen table. They're coming, next week. That's good, Andrew said carefully. They should be part of the children's lives. You don't understand, Linda has that tone, that judgmental, disappointed tone she used at David's funeral. She's coming to evaluate me, to look for reasons I'm failing. You're not failing, in her eyes I am. I was never good enough for David. His parents wanted him to marry someone educated, someone from a good family. Instead he married me, a girl whose father was a construction worker and whose mother was dead. They tolerated me because David loved me, but they never approved. And now I'm proving them right. I couldn't keep it together after he died, couldn't keep my job, my apartment, my dignity, ended up homeless and squatting. Everything they feared would happen did happen. Andrew reached across the table and took her hand. Except now you're not homeless. You have a home, a family, stability. If they come looking for evidence of failure, they won't find it. They'll find out about the adoption. They'll say I'm using you. Let them, you're my daughter. They can't change that. But Keisha couldn't shake her dread. She spent the week cleaning obsessively, cooking dishes she hadn't made in years, trying to create the perfect picture of a woman who had her life together. Gerald and Linda Thompson arrived the day before Thanksgiving in their expensive rental car. They were both in their early 60s, well-dressed, well-preserved, exactly the kind of people who'd never known real struggle. Keisha met them in the driveway, Andrew standing supportively beside her. Gerald, Linda, thank you for coming. Keisha, Linda's hug was brief and cold. And this must be Mr. Wellington. Andrew, please, come in. They toured the house, Linda's sharp eyes missing nothing. The renovated kitchen, the boys' bedroom with its bunk beds and toys, Zoe's toddler bed with its colorful quilt, the garden visible through the back windows. You've certainly made improvements, Gerald observed. Very different from the last time we were here. Andrew and I have worked hard on it, Keisha said carefully. Over lunch, the Thompsons asked careful questions, probing for weaknesses. So Keisha, you're living here permanently now? Linda asked. Yes, this is home. Rent-free, I assume. We have a financial arrangement that works for both of us. How generous of Mr. Wellington. Linda's smile didn't reach her eyes. And you're working, I hope, providing for the children. I'm working on finishing my degree so I can have a real career instead of cobbling together minimum wage jobs. Andrew is supporting that goal. Andrew, how familiar. Linda set down her fork. Keisha, I'm going to be direct. We're concerned. The children are our only connection to David. We need to know they're being raised properly. They're being raised with love and stability. What more do they need? They need more than the situation you've provided so far. Homelessness, job instability, living with a man you barely know. Actually, Andrew interrupted, his voice calm but firm. Keisha and I have been formalizing our relationship. I'm adopting her as my daughter. The children will be my legal grandchildren. The silence was deafening. Linda's fork clattered to her plate. Gerald stared, adopting her. Gerald finally managed. That's highly unusual, but legal and appropriate for our circumstances, Andrew said. Keisha needs family support. I need family, period. We're meeting each other's needs. And when you die, Mr. Wellington, what happens to the children then? When I die, Keisha inherits my estate. The children will have financial security for generations. But more importantly, they'll have had years of stability, education, opportunity, everything I can give them while I'm alive. Linda and Gerald exchanged glances. This clearly wasn't what they'd expected. We'd like to spend time alone with the children, Linda said. Take them to the park perhaps. Of course, Keisha agreed, though her hands were shaking. There's a park 2 blocks away. After the grandparents left with Jamal and Zoe, the toddler chattering excitedly about Grandma and Grandpa, Keisha collapsed onto the couch. That was a disaster. It was fine. You handled it well. Did you see Linda's face? She looked like she'd bitten into something rotten. Because we undercut her narrative, she came expecting to find you failing. Instead she found stability and family structure. She's going to fight us. I know her. She's going to try for custody. Let her try. We'll be prepared. That evening, after the Thompsons returned with the children and left for their hotel, Linda called Keisha's cell. We need to talk, privately. They met at a coffee shop downtown. Linda got straight to the point. Gerald and I have been discussing filing for custody of the children. Keisha's stomach dropped. Why? Because they're our son's children. Because they deserve every advantage. Because this arrangement you have with Mr. Wellington is concerning. Concerning how? Keisha, you barely know this man. You've known him 2 months, and you're letting him adopt you. How is that in the children's best interest? It gives them a grandfather, stability, security, everything I couldn't provide alone. Or it puts them at risk. What do you really know about him? What if he's not who he seems? He's exactly who he seems. A lonely man who wants family, or a wealthy man who wants control. Who knows what his real motivations are? Linda leaned forward. Listen to me carefully. If you go through with this adoption, we will file for custody. We have resources. We have attorneys. We have a strong case that you've demonstrated poor judgment and instability. I'm their mother.
A mother who was homeless, who broke into an abandoned house, who's now involved in what looks like a financially motivated arrangement with an elderly stranger. Do you really think a judge won't question your fitness? You want to take my children away. We want to ensure they're properly cared for. If that means taking custody, we'll do it. For their sake and for David's memory. After Linda left, Keisha sat in the coffee shop and cried. Not the silent tears she allowed herself in private, but great heaving sobs that drew concerned looks from other customers. Everything was falling apart again. Just when she'd started to hope, started to believe things might actually work out. David's parents were threatening to take the only thing that mattered. She called Andrew from the parking lot, barely able to speak through her panic. They're going to file for custody. Linda just told me. They think I'm unfit, think the adoption is suspicious. They're going to take my babies. No, they're not. Come home, we'll figure this out. How? They have money for lawyers, they have stability, they have everything judges look for. And we have truth. You're a good mother. The children are thriving. We'll fight this and we'll win. But driving home, Keisha couldn't shake Linda's words. Poor judgment and instability. Was that what everyone would see? Not a woman trying to survive, but a woman making desperate, questionable choices. Was the adoption a mistake? Had she put her children at risk by agreeing to it? She didn't know anymore. All she knew was that the hope she'd allowed herself to feel was crumbling, and the shame was back stronger than ever. The custody petition arrived the first week of December, delivered by a process server who came to the house while Keisha was making breakfast. Zoe was in her high chair eating cut-up pancakes with her fingers, humming tunelessly. Keisha read through the petition with shaking hands, Andrew looking over her shoulder. Gerald and Linda Thompson were filing for full custody of both children, claiming their mother was unable to provide stable housing, had demonstrated poor judgment, and was entering into a questionable relationship with a stranger 46 years her senior for apparent financial gain. They're making it sound like I'm using you, Keisha said, her voice hollow, like this is some kind of scam. It's not a scam, it's family, but how do we prove that? How do we prove this is real when we've only known each other for 2 months? When the adoption isn't even finalized yet? She set down the papers. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am demonstrating poor judgment. Maybe I am risking my children's welfare. Stop. You're not risking anything. You're providing them with security they wouldn't have otherwise. Or I'm providing ammunition for people who want to take them away. Andrew called Marcus Price immediately. The attorney arrived that afternoon with Patricia Chen, a family law specialist his firm worked with. Patricia was a woman in her late 30s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She read through the custody petition carefully. "This is serious," she said. "They're going for the throat, alleging financial exploitation, questionable judgment, instability. If we don't respond properly, they could win." "What do we do?" Keisha asked. "First, we accelerate the adoption timeline. Get it finalized before the custody hearing if possible. That changes the legal landscape significantly. You'd be Andrew's daughter with family support, not a single mother in a questionable living arrangement." "Can we do that?" "Marcus can file for emergency expedition based on the custody threat. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible." "Second," Patricia continued, "we build a comprehensive case showing you're a good mother. Statements from teachers, neighbors, doctors, evidence of the children's well-being and development. Proof that your current situation is stable and beneficial for them. And third, we prepare you for what this trial will be like. They're going to attack your character, your choices, your relationship with Andrew. It won't be pleasant." Over the next weeks they assembled their case. Dorothy gave a statement about Keisha's character and dedication. Raymond described the property improvements and community integration. Jamal's teacher submitted a glowing report about his academic and social progress. Zoe's pediatrician provided records showing the toddler was healthy, well cared for, and meeting all developmental milestones. Dr. Patterson provided medical records showing Andrew's heart was healing well and that he had a normal life expectancy for his age with proper care. But the hardest part was preparing Keisha emotionally. Patricia pulled no punches during their preparation sessions. "They're going to ask about the homelessness, about living in your car with your children. How are you going to answer?" "I'll say I did what I had to do to keep us together." "They'll say you put your children at risk, that any responsible mother would have accepted help from family or gone to a shelter. The shelters would have separated us. David's parents wanted to take the children. I couldn't let that happen. And the squatting. How do you justify breaking into someone's property?" Keisha's voice broke. "I don't justify it. It was wrong, but it was less wrong than letting my children sleep in a car or giving them up to people who thought I was too incompetent to raise them." Patricia's expression softened slightly. "That's good. Own the difficult choices, but frame them as a mother protecting her children. Don't apologize for surviving." The court date was set for mid-February. The judge assigned to the case was Eleanor Harris, a black woman in her mid-60s known for being thorough and fair but tough. In mid-January, Marcus got approval for an expedited adoption hearing, scheduled for 2 weeks before the custody trial. If approved, Keisha would legally become Andrew's daughter before facing David's parents in court. The adoption hearing was held on a cold February morning. Judge Harris reviewed all the documentation, background checks, home studies, financial arrangements, the testimony of the social worker Helen Rodriguez. "This is highly unusual," Judge Harris said, looking at both Andrew and Keisha over her reading glasses. "Adult adoption is rare, and adult adoption in connection with a custody battle raises questions." "Your Honor," Marcus stood, "my client and Miss Thompson began this process before any custody threat emerged. They're not creating a family to win a court case. They're formalizing a relationship that already exists." "Mr. Wellington, approach the bench please." Andrew stood and approached. Judge Harris studied him for a long moment. "Why are you doing this?" "And I want the truth, not a prepared answer. Because I'm 67 years old and I spent my whole life building an empire while avoiding family. My wife left me because of it. I never had children because I was always too busy. I had a heart attack 2 months ago and realized I'd wasted my life on things that don't matter." He paused. "When I found Keisha and her children in my house, I found what I'd been missing. Purpose, connection, people who need me for reasons that have nothing to do with my money. I want to be their family not because it looks good or because it's strategic, but because they make my life mean something. And you understand this is permanent. That once I sign these papers, Keisha Thompson is your daughter legally, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." "Yes, Your Honor, that's exactly what I want." Judge Harris turned to Keisha. "Miss Thompson, approach." Keisha stood on shaking legs and approached the bench. "Are you entering this adoption freely, without coercion or financial pressure?" "Yes, Your Honor, completely freely." "Why?" Keisha thought about all the prepared answers, all the strategic framing. Then she decided to just tell the truth. "Because I lost my father when I was 17 and I've missed having a father ever since."
Because Andrew has shown me and my children more genuine care in 3 months than most people show in years. Because when he was sick, taking care of him felt right in a way that's hard to explain. Because my children need a grandfather and I need to know there's someone in our corner if something happens to me." She paused. "And yes, because the financial security matters. I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because we've become family in every way that matters except paperwork. This just makes it official." Judge Harris was quiet for a long moment. Then she signed the papers. "Andrew Wellington, you are hereby granted permission to adopt Keisha Thompson as your adult daughter effective immediately. Miss Thompson, your name will be legally changed to Keisha Thompson Wellington if you choose to use the hyphenated form. This court will review the arrangement in 6 months to ensure it's working as intended. Congratulations, your family now." Andrew and Keisha looked at each other, and suddenly Keisha was crying and hugging him, this man who was now legally her father. "We did it," she whispered. "We're really family." "Yes," Andrew said, his own eyes wet. "We really are." Outside the courtroom, Patricia was waiting. "Good. Now we're in a much stronger position for the custody hearing. You're not a single mother anymore, you're a daughter with family support. That changes everything." But as they drove home, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. The custody hearing took place 2 weeks later on a gray March morning. The courtroom was cold and institutional, nothing like the warmth of the adoption hearing. Gerald and Linda Thompson sat on one side with their attorney Bradford Winters, an expensive silver-haired man who looked like he'd never lost a case in his life. Keisha and Andrew sat on the other side with Patricia Chen and Marcus Price. Judge Eleanor Harris presided over both hearings. She looked at all parties gravely as the hearing began. "Given the recent adoption, this case has taken on new complexity. We're no longer discussing a single mother's fitness. We're discussing whether there's cause to remove children from a 2-parent household. Mr. Winters, present your case." Bradford Winters stood, and his opening statement was devastating. "Your Honor, this case is about 2 children who tragically lost their father and whose mother has demonstrated a pattern of instability and poor judgment. 6 months of homelessness, including 3 weeks living in a car with small children. 7 months of illegally occupying someone else's property. Multiple job losses. And most recently, entering into what can only be described as a questionable arrangement with a wealthy elderly man." He presented evidence methodically, documentation of Keisha's eviction, employment records showing job losses, photos of the car she'd lived in. He called a medical expert who testified about Andrew's heart condition and elevated mortality risk for his age group. The adoption that was just finalized, Winters continued, occurred under suspicious circumstances. Miss Thompson meets Mr. Wellington in October. By November she's being offered adoption. By February, it's finalized, just weeks before this custody hearing. The timing suggests this is a strategic maneuver rather than genuine family formation. Then he called Linda Thompson to the stand. "Mrs. Thompson, when did you last see your grandchildren?" "At Thanksgiving. They were staying with Keisha in Mr. Wellington's house." "And how did the children seem to you?" "Confused. The baby Zoe didn't really remember us. She cried when I tried to hold her at first. Jamal was polite but distant. It was heartbreaking." Linda dabbed at her eyes. "These are our son's children, our only connection to him, and they barely know us because Keisha has kept them isolated." "How often have you requested to see the children since your son passed away?" "Multiple times. But Keisha always had excuses. Too busy, the children were sick, it wasn't a good time. We've seen them perhaps 4 times in 2 years. It was a masterful performance." By the time Linda left the stand, she'd painted Keisha as a mother who'd kept the children from loving grandparents while making one poor choice after another. Then it was Patricia's turn. She called Dorothy first, who testified about Keisha's character and dedication. "That woman works harder than anyone I've ever met. 3 jobs while raising 2 children alone. She's not perfect, but she's devoted." Raymond testified about the property improvements and how the family had integrated into the community. Jamal's teacher provided evidence of his dramatic academic and social improvements since the previous fall. Then Patricia called Andrew. "Mr. Wellington, you had a serious heart attack. Why would you take on the responsibility of a family at this stage of your life?" "Because responsibility is what was missing from my life. I spent 30 years avoiding exactly this kind of commitment. It nearly killed me, not the heart attack, but the loneliness and emptiness that preceded it. He looked at Keisha. These people aren't a burden, they're what makes my life worth living. And the adoption, was that a strategic response to the custody threat? No, I proposed adoption in late October before any custody threat existed. We didn't formalize it immediately because Keisha needed time to think, and because there are legal processes that take time. The fact that it was finalized before this hearing is coincidence, not strategy. What happens to Keisha and the children if you die tomorrow? They inherit everything. They're financially secure, but more importantly, Keisha will have had months of stability to finish school, to heal emotionally, to build a foundation that doesn't disappear with me. Even if I died tomorrow, I'd have given them something valuable. Bradford Winters cross-examined aggressively. Mr. Wellington, isn't it true that you threatened to call the police when you first discovered Miss Thompson in your house? Yes, so initially you saw her as a criminal, not as family. Initially I saw her as a stranger who'd broken into my property. But over time I came to see her as a person in desperate circumstances, making difficult choices to protect her children. A person you barely know. You've known her for 4 months. That's not enough time to judge someone's character, is it? I disagree. In 4 months I've seen her at her most vulnerable, caring for me during illness, working multiple jobs, raising her children with limited resources. I've seen more of her real character than many people show in years. Or you've been manipulated by a desperate woman who saw an opportunity. If she was a manipulator, she'd have stolen from me. She'd have taken advantage during the weeks I was sick and vulnerable. Instead, she cared for me and asked for nothing in return. Then Keisha took the stand and Andrew watched anxiously as Winters went after her. Miss Thompson, you were homeless with your children, living in a car. Isn't that child endangerment? I was keeping us together. The alternative was a shelter system that would have separated my children by age. They'd have been in different areas, away from me. I couldn't let that happen. So instead you had them sleeping in a car in August heat, for 3 weeks. It was terrible. It was the worst 3 weeks of my life. But they were with me, and they were safe. Safe? In a car in a Walmart parking lot, with a 6-year-old and a toddler. Safer than separated in a shelter. Safer than with people who thought I was too incompetent to raise them. People like the Thompsons. They wanted to take my children. David's father told me at the funeral that I should consider my options for their care. I knew what that meant. Or maybe he was offering help that you were too proud to accept. Keisha's voice hardened. It wasn't help. It was judgment wrapped in concern. They never thought I was good enough for David. When he died, they saw their chance to prove they'd been right all along. And Mr. Wellington, was adopting him about pride or about money? It was about needing a father, about my children needing a grandfather, about building something stable after 2 years of chaos. She paused. Yes, the money matters. I won't pretend it doesn't. Financial security means my children can focus on school instead of worrying where we'll sleep. It means I can finish my education instead of working 3 jobs that barely keep us fed. But that's not why I said yes. I said yes because Andrew has shown up for us in ways nobody else has. Shown up for 4 months. What happens in month 5, month 12, when the novelty wears off? Then we'll deal with it like families do. By communicating, by working through problems, by being committed to each other even when it's hard. After Keisha left the stand, Patricia called her final witness, Jamal. The 6-year-old sat in the witness chair looking small and scared. Judge Harris's voice softened, addressing him. Jamal, do you understand why you're here? Mama said some people want me and Zoe to live in Texas. That's right, your grandma and grandpa Thompson think you might be happier living with them. How do you feel about that? Jamal's bottom lip trembled. I don't want to leave Mama, and I don't want to leave Grandpa Andrew. Tell me about Grandpa Andrew. He teaches me stuff. Chess and birds and how to be kind to people. He reads me stories and helps with my homework. He's really nice, and he takes care of Zoe when she cries. She really likes him. And how long have you known him? Since October. He came to Mama's house, your Mama's house, Mama's and Grandpa Andrew's house. It's both theirs now. How do you feel when you're with Grandpa Andrew? Safe, happy. He's like, Jamal struggled to find words. He's like a real grandpa, not like someone who visits sometimes. He's there every day. He makes funny faces at Zoe to make her laugh when she's sad. Judge Harris was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Jamal. You can go back to your mom now. After all testimony concluded, Judge Harris called a brief recess. They waited in a small conference room, the tension suffocating. Little Zoe, sensing something important was happening, was unusually quiet, sitting on Keisha's lap and sucking her thumb. How did we do? Keisha asked Patricia. As well as we could. Now we wait. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Harris looked exhausted. I've listened carefully to all testimony and reviewed all evidence. This is a complex case involving grief, fear, love, and competing visions of what's best for these children. She looked at Gerald and Linda. Your love for your grandchildren is evident. Your grief for your son is understandable. You've lived 2 years watching your grandchildren from a distance, worried about their welfare. That's genuine concern, not malice. Then she turned to Keisha. Miss Thompson, you've faced extraordinary challenges. You've made choices many would question, but always with your children's welfare as the priority. You've demonstrated resilience and determination. Here is my ruling. The custody petition is denied. Keisha Thompson Wellington retains full custody of both minor children. The evidence shows that while she has struggled, she has not failed her children. They are healthy, well-adjusted, and thriving in her care. Keisha started crying, and Andrew put his arm around her. However, Judge Harris continued, I'm ordering regular visitation for the Thompsons, 1 weekend per month and 2 weeks each summer. These children need to know their paternal grandparents. That connection to their father is important. As for the adoption that precipitated this hearing, I find it unusual but genuine. Mr. Wellington and Miss Thompson have demonstrated authentic mutual care. This is not financial exploitation, it's family formation. She banged her gavel. Case closed. Outside the courtroom, Linda Thompson approached them, tears streaming down her face. Keisha, I'm sorry. We were wrong to try to take the children. We were just so desperate to hold on to David somehow. Keisha took a deep breath. I understand, and I want you to know, the court ordered visitation, but I would have offered it anyway. The children need to know you. You're their grandparents. Thank you. Linda looked at Andrew. Take care of them. Please, all of them. I will. They're family now. As they drove home, Keisha sat silently, processing everything. In the back seat, Jamal was chattering excitedly about going out for ice cream to celebrate. Zoe had fallen asleep in her car seat, her thumb in her mouth, her other hand clutching her stuffed bear. It's really over, Keisha finally said. It's really over. I'm your daughter, legally, officially. Yes, and nobody can take my children away. Nobody. Keisha started laughing and crying at the same time. We did it. We actually did it. We did. Andrew agreed, feeling his own eyes sting. We're family now, officially, legally, permanently. That night, after the children were asleep, Jamal in his bed, Zoe in her toddler bed, with her bear tucked beside her. Keisha came to Andrew's room. Can I tell you something? Always, when I was taking care of you when you were sick, I kept seeing my daddy. Same silver hair, same way you looked vulnerable in sleep. It was like caring for him one last time, getting to help him the way I couldn't when he actually died. Tears streamed down her face. That's when I knew I wanted you to be my father. Not because of money or security, but because you reminded me what it felt like to have a daddy who needed me. Andrew pulled her into a hug. And you reminded me what it felt like to be needed. We saved each other, kiddo. Don't call me kiddo. I'm 33, you're my daughter. I'll call you kiddo if I want. Keisha laughed through her tears. Okay, Dad. The word hung between them. Finally spoken, finally real. Dad. Andrew Wellington stood in the backyard watching his grandson Jamal play soccer with the neighborhood kids. At 8 years old, Jamal was fast and focused, already showing real promise. Nearby, Zoe, now 4.5, her hair in neat braids. Keisha had spent the morning helped Andrew plant spring flowers. She patted the soil carefully around each seedling, her face scrunched in concentration. Like this, Grandpa, perfect, gentle but firm. Can we plant purple ones? Purple's my favorite. We can plant any colors you want. Purple and pink, and yellow for Mama. Keisha stepped out onto the porch carrying lemonade and sandwiches. At 36, she looked nothing like the desperate woman Andrew had met 3 years earlier. She had finished her bachelor's degree, was halfway through a master's in social work, and had founded a non-profit, Second Chances, helping homeless families find stable housing. Lunch, she called. They gathered at the picnic table. Jamal talked non-stop about his game. Zoe announced she wanted to be a flower doctor because flowers needed doctors too. It was wonderfully ordinary. How's the non-profit going? Andrew asked. Good. We helped 4 families last month. One mother reminded me so much of myself back then, scared, exhausted. I told her my story. It helped. You're helping a lot of people. We're helping people, Keisha corrected gently. I couldn't do this without you. I just wrote checks, Andrew said. You did the work. That afternoon, Gerald and Linda Thompson arrived for their monthly visit. What had once been tense had softened into something real. They laughed with the children, helped Zoe plant flowers, and stayed for dinner. That night, after the kids were asleep, Jamal reading under his covers, Zoe curled in her big girl bed, Andrew and Keisha sat on the porch swing. Can you believe it's been 3 years? Keisha asked. Best 3 years of my life. Mine too. I thought I'd only ever survive after David died, but now I'm living. Do you ever regret it? She asked quietly. Taking us in, Andrew didn't hesitate. Never. Not once. She leaned against him. I love you, Dad. I love you too. Later, lying in bed, Andrew reflected on the journey that had brought him here. An abandoned house, a second chance, a family he never expected. He had spent decades building an empire, and found it empty. Then he built a family, and found everything. At 70, Andrew Wellington finally understood success. It wasn't money, it wasn't power, it was family, and that was the only empire worth building.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.